Hello and welcome back to Why I Made This. My name is Ollie, and before we get into the subject of today's video, I just want to say a massive thank you to everybody who has watched, liked, commented or subscribed after watching my latest video for the Big Bot Bash Challenge. To say it's been overwhelming is an understatement. As of last week I was on 750 subscribers, and as of today I'm on 2,300, which is incredible. Massive shout out to Bill from Bill Making Stuff for letting me be part of it. And all the other crafters who are part of the challenge as well have just kind of embraced me and welcomed me into their little community. It's been amazing. So obviously I'm good friends with Theo already, but getting to know Dan Durs and Whittle Goblin and everybody else has been absolutely amazing. So thank you very much. But today we're here to talk about the making of my latest music video, Pillhouse Popper Moonshine for the Psychedelic Porn Crumpets. Now, many of you know I've worked for this band quite extensively over the last couple of years, and I've done like 7 to 8 music videos for them. We've dabbled in fairy tale fantasy with a little sprinkle of sci-fi. We've even done kitchen sink drama mixed with a melt movie, of all things. And for this one, I thought I really want to lean heavily on the sci-fi horror genre and invoke those films that I grew up on, such as Alien, The Thing, The Blob, Akira, even more recent films such as Mandy, and video games like Resident Evil and Dead Space, with a little bit of Lovecraftian horror thrown in for good measure. So in this video we're going to go through the entire process, from the storyboards to the pre-production, like making the sets and the props and the characters, the actual animation, and then the post-production, like doing the effects and editing. So yeah, without further ado, let's see how I get on. So, after I've come up with my initial idea for the music video, I always do the storyboard first. I'm not much of a writer, I'm an artist, so I think in visuals. So that's what I do, I kind of write with drawings. I start off by doing very crude drawings before refining them to a certain point. They're still a bit crude, but you know, they're a little bit more legible. And I think I did around 23 pages of storyboards for this video. And for a 4.5 minute video, it's probably a little bit overkill. The bonus of doing the storyboard and the animatic at the same time is that if I'm missing a shot, I can just go back and draw something and drop it in the timeline. But because of the short time frame, doing the animatic for me is also like designing the characters. I also need to know what sets and props I need to make, as well as how much I actually need to animate. So now I thought it'd be fun to look at my favourite sequence of the music video side by side with the animatic. So when coming up with the characters, initially it was going to be everyday humans versus an alien. But when talking to Jack about the idea for the video, I could tell there was just something about it that he was not 100% sold on. And for some reason I just went, well, obviously they're not going to be humans, they're going to be like aliens. And as soon as I said that, he perked up, and in my head the idea became even stronger then, because then I thought, how about it's about aliens versus a human? And I thought, that's the idea, that's where the hook is. So, like my previous videos, I'm going to be doing a hybrid of costumed characters with plasticine heads and things like that, purely for the fact that there's a shortage of plasticine now, since my favourite brand, New Plast, no longer exists, and Aardman Animations bought the entire stock. But it just so happens I have a load of costumes already, like trousers, jumpers and hazmat suits and things like that, so I'm picking out bits that I have that I can then place on top of my armatures, like here. So now I thought it'd be fun to show you how I actually make one of my characters. I actually pad them out with wadding to start off with, just to kind of build out the shape. Because the one thing with plasticine was that the characters can be too heavy, and also they're very cumbersome, and you have to treat them with kid gloves, like be really careful with them. Whereas this, you can kind of be a little bit more hands-on with them. I'm just putting on some of the little 1/6 scale clothing on, and to get that combat boot look, I'm pushing up the bottoms of the trouser legs, and then I'm securing the waist around with a bit more tape so they don't fall down. And because I love the claymation effect, I still want part of the character to be plasticine, so I'm doing the top half of her body in plasticine. And then eventually start to smooth it out and make it look nice and neat. And I do realise that she actually does look like Leela from Futurama. When I was making it, it didn't cross my mind, which is really bizarre because I love Futurama, but I'm guessing it's in there in the back of my mind at all times. And there's me making the character, just working on the hands there and securing the hands to the body with the little Allen key, and then smoothing it out. And I'll do the same to the other arm. And now I'm doing the boots. And now the head. Just place it onto the neck just to make sure it's the right size, because I've done it many times where I've made the head and it's far too big or far too small for the actual body, so it's always best to check the size of your head before you start sculpting away. And now I'm drawing the eyeballs on with a Sharpie just onto the beads, which I use for eyes because they've got little holes that you can move around with a pin. And here I am just sculpting away in my element. I absolutely love sculpting. It's probably one of my favourite parts of making the videos, just making the characters. And these are all the FIMO belt parts, like pouches, buckles and things like that, which I attach to a piece of pleather and then glue around the back. And just a little wrist strap. Again, I'm pretty sure Leela has one of those as well, and it didn't spring to mind when I was making it, I promise. Just doing the finishing touches. I always like to do a few strands of hair so that when I'm animating and the head's moving around, a bit of the hair can flick around. It just makes it look nice and natural. And here's a few turnarounds of the character just so we can get a good look at her. Yeah, I'm really pleased with how she looks actually. I think she's pretty cool. And you'll see how I made that gun a bit later on. But it's always fun to pose them out and just kind of play around with them, see what you can kind of do with them before you start animating with them. That's the good thing about these 1/6 scale clothing. You can kind of be a bit more adventurous with your animation, I think, because otherwise you fear that you're going to risk damaging the character that you've spent hours and hours and hours making. So this is my concept design for the astronaut costumes that Kaylee and the rest of her team wear at the beginning of the video, and I had no idea how I was going to make this. I had the actual hazmat suits that I could use, but for the actual bits and bobs I had no idea what I was going to make. So I thought, Action Man had loads of space stuff. Maybe I could find some of that off eBay, and I could ask around the toy groups, and actually I was kindly donated some bits as well by people. But then I went to a toy shop just to see what I could find, and I found all this amazing Buzz Lightyear stuff, and I'm guessing the film didn't do very well because it was dirt cheap. But they had these ones that were in the exact same scale as my stop motion characters that had like clip-on spacesuit parts, and this part itself was absolutely fantastic. And I thought, if this is sprayed up black and painted up with a bit of silver and that, it's going to look awesome. I also sprayed up the belts and the boots that it came with, but for some reason they just remained tacky and would never dry. But the actual body part itself worked an absolute treat. And as you can see all together, it looks pretty good, I think, with the belt that I'd made previously. And I painted the dome bit with a bit of glass paint on the inside, so it had a yellow tint as opposed to just a clear tint, just to kind of, I don't know, make it a little bit different. And I think it really fits in with that kind of alien Dead Space kind of vibe that I was going for. And the actual guns that I make, again, which I'll show you later on, I attached a little light that I got from eBay that was recommended to me by my good friend Rob, who has a channel called Robology, where he travels the UK and goes camping and climbing and hiking, and it's a fantastic channel, so check it out if you get the chance. It's really good, really awe-inspiring stuff, a lot more fun and insightful than the stupid stuff that I make. But yeah, posing around these characters, kind of getting a feel for them before I start animating is always fun. And one of the great things about this costume was that I could actually take the dome off, so I could actually animate the face, you know, move the eyebrows around, move the eyeballs and flick the hair around, and then place the dome back over the top. I just had to kind of cut a few of the tabs off the back, but yeah, it worked an absolute charm. So we've seen Kaylee, let's have a look at some of the other characters. So this is Dr. Voltrax, the ship's doctor, and I guess he looks very Rick and Morty, kind of Admiral Akbar-ish. This is Slughead, he's kind of like the muscle of the team, and I guess he kind of looks a bit frog-like. And there's Kaylee again. And, yeah, she's pretty badass. This is Captain Billingsley, he's the ship's captain. I really wish I had more of this guy in the video, because he's probably one of my favourite things I've ever made. I actually loved how he turned out. And I'm annoyed with myself because I didn't get a video of Arachnid, who is one of my favourites just purely for the fact of his name alone. So now I've got to make the villain of the piece, which is actually Kaylee's husband, which is revealed in the video. I didn't want to make him look exactly the same as the other astronauts, so I cut up a Buzz Lightyear action figure and cut out some of his bits and bobs from his suit and placed it on an Action Man spacesuit, sprayed the parts up and added some tubes, and as you can see, he kind of looks like that classic spaceman, deep sea diver kind of look to him, with a cracked helmet, which is quite emblematic of sci-fi fantasy horror. So the astronaut has several looks throughout the video as he's kind of changing into this monster as it's like consuming him, taking him over. And this is probably my favourite version of him, which is this giant globulous monster that still can walk around, and that's very Resident Evil-like. And I put lots of tendrils and tentacles coming out of his mouth. I made lots of teeth out of Fimo so they were nice and hard. I even sprayed some of the expanding foam and picked out little bits and placed it onto the actual character, so it kind of felt in keeping with the rest of the look of the visuals of the video. And the eyeball on his back can actually like move around, and I created pieces that could go over his eyeball, so it looks like it opens up in kind of like a liquid kind of form, so it kind of opens up like that. I don't know if that's an explanation, but it's like onomatopoeia, like a if that makes sense. So now we're on to the sets and the props. And initially, when I started the video, I was like, right, I'm only making 2 sets, that's my limit, because I always go overboard on these things. But I ended up making like 6 or 7 props. Me being me, I just end up going over the top. I mean, I had to make 2 of these corridors because I wanted a really long shot of the camera pulling through the corridors of the infected ship at the beginning. And if you notice, it's kind of a little bit underscaled. The doors at the side are way shorter than my stop motion characters. Whoops, but we don't really dwell on it that much, so I don't think anyone notices. I printed out some stickers, decals to place around the sets just to kind of make it feel a bit more realistic, I guess. And I found out you can get black expanding foam. I think it's for ponds, but I thought this would be a perfect look for the video. And I could spray it all around the ship and things like that, and it would make it look like all gnarled and infected and just gross looking. Originally, I was going to kind of film it via time lapse and have it so that as it was expanding, I can have it like expanding and contracting, but it was just too much, and the shots are so quick that I don't think it'd even be like noticeable on film. But I think the end effect looks awesome, and I think my dog also agrees. What do you reckon, Lala? I mean, to be honest, I don't think she really cares. And now making a cockpit, which is going to be at the beginning of the video, where we see our first victim of this space cancer, making a chair there. This chair was a lot of fun to make, but I sprayed it with black spray paint, and if you don't know anything about black spray paint, it kind of eats away at foam, so I had to cover it all in the EVA foam, and it actually looked even better then, but it was just a lot more work. Spraying more of that expanding foam around the set, and I chose not to use the main nozzle because it makes it too fluffy, so I then have to go around it with a stick to kind of poke it down so it doesn't go too big, so I can control it a little bit and make it even more gnarled. Otherwise it just becomes this big puffy cloud, but if you kind of splodge it around like this a little bit, it kind of makes it look even more evil and demonic looking. I placed one of the astronauts in the set. And I printed out some little 3D skulls. My wife recently bought me a 3D printer for my birthday, so I've been experimenting with that a little bit. And then I painted it up and dry brushed it and put some plasticine eyeballs in it and then placed it onto the armature. And then I covered him in some of the expanding foam, like the disease has gotten into him and that's what's killed him and eaten him away. And then this is one of the escape pods that you see later on in the video. And then I made some little attachments so I could animate like little fins popping out. This is a little robot I made with like a little armature arm at the back, and I wanted to feature it more in the video, but didn't get around to it. And then these canisters are going to be like little power cells. They're just Coke cans sprayed up black, which I then cover in EVA foam, yellow EVA foam, and then put some like stickers and decals on it. And I was planning to have like the monster crush them and things like that in the video, but again didn't get around to it. And then this is some sort of, I don't know, like engine power cell. I don't know what it is, it's just something I made to put in the background of one of the sets that I could put lights and things like that in it. This is the bed that we see in the hospital area that that Kaylee's husband sits in. And I was really pleased with how this turned out actually. I thought it was pretty cool. I put some like little decals of screens on and things like that. Normally I'd probably put those screens on in afterwards in like with visual effects and that, but I just thought just to save time I'd make like stickers that I could just place inside of it. And then I covered the inside with the EVA foam just to neaten it up a little bit. And then I'm using some more of these little lights that Rob told me about, and I placed them inside of the bed, and once the character sits inside of it, it kind of illuminates all around him and it looks really cool, especially when you close the doors on it. Just making some crates now. These are very much based on the supply crates that you see in Star Wars or I don't know, Portal, or you know, games like that. They're a pain in the bum to make, so I don't know why I keep making them, because they're so fiddly. You have to do so many little parts to glue together, and then painting them is also another pain in the bum as well, because as you can see it's all messy and then you have to go back around with black paint to neaten it up, and it just takes hours. So I don't know why I do it to myself, but I do it anyway because I'm a glutton for punishment. Making a staircase here, and again I sprayed it with black paint and it started to eat away at the foam because I don't learn my lessons, so I cut some strips of EVA foam and then hot glued them on just to neaten it up. And it's in the video so little that I don't think anyone would have even noticed, but I would notice. I know they're there, so I have to neaten it up and spend hours of my life doing it, because again I obviously hate myself and I don't respect my free time. So I do things like this that are unnecessary, but they make it look a lot better in my mind. Now I'm just dry brushing some silver on it just to make it look a bit worn. This hospital area might be one of my favourite sets that I made. Again, I just used decals for the computer screens. In the past I would have used moving visual elements for these, but I just don't think it's necessary. It's just more work than I have to do in post that I just don't really want to do or have the time for. Put some lights behind the vent there just to create some more ambient lights and depth to the piece. And I just fill the room up with lots of squares and rectangles and Pringle cans and straws and lids off containers from a Indian takeaway, and it really adds to that cassette futurism look that I was going for. It's famous in films such as Alien and Star Wars. And like this computer screen here is made out of an apple and peanut butter tub that my wife has as a little snack while she's working, and it just kind of all works together, and you put some stickers and decals on as well, and it just all comes together. So as I said earlier, I've been dabbling with 3D printing, and in my storyboards I drew all the characters with the pulse rifle from Aliens just because it looks awesome, but I was planning on making my own guns, but when it came down to it, I just didn't have the time to make 3 identical guns. So I thought, what am I going to do? So as I was looking around Etsy, I found someone had made a 3D file of the pulse rifle from Aliens, so I thought, you know what, let's just do it. So I purchased the 3D file, put them in my 3D printer, printed them out, which I've been having issues. None of my prints have turned out very well, but for some reason they came out perfectly. Sprayed them black and put a bit of silver dry brush on them, and they came out looking awesome. This is a ship from the Buzz Lightyear line, and it's called the Armadillo, I think, but I wasn't quite thrilled with how the front looked, so I just added a load of guff onto the front of it to build it out, and then primed it all up white. And it was literally freezing cold, like -2 while I was doing this. But thankfully it turned out okay, and then I started to paint it up and use the same colour schemes as I used for the interiors, so oranges and greys, and then I weathered it using shoe polish, and then went over that with a bit of methylated spirits just to take it away a bit, but it gave it that really cool, dirty Alien Star Wars look that I was going for the ships. And then I put some extra decals on and weathered them up with felt tip pens and things like that, and yeah, I think it turned out pretty good. And then I did the exact same method for the smaller ship. This is actually like a concoction of 3 different ships put together, and I think it looks really cool actually. I was really pleased with how this turned out. And the one thing I love about this shoe polish technique is that once you plaster it on and then start taking it away with the methylated spirits, it still retains inside all those grooves and rivets and things like that, and just makes it look so bold and comic booky. I absolutely love it. It looks fantastic, and it makes it look all charred underneath, especially like around the boosters and things like that. It looks great. So I had to make some like bigatures. So these are kind of scaled up parts of the 2 ships that I've worked on, so I could do the docking sequence. So yeah, here's a mess of sets and props that I've built for the video. So here's the actual bed for the hospital, and then the area where the escape pod comes out, and then I actually built the inside of the cockpit here, and all these panels can come in and out so I can film from various different angles. Here's the side of the hallway for the beginning of the video, and I made 4 of these, and again the bigatures, and I made loads of different versions of these doors so I could animate the doors opening and closing. And then I made some white versions of the supply crates. And I made a giant version of the hero ship that's way too big. I mean, it's in scale with the other bigature that I made, but I just made them both way too big and cumbersome. But it turned out all right in the end, but for my own sanity, I should have made them smaller. I made a bunch of doors that I could animate so they can open and close, you know, in that kind of Star Trek sci-fi way, like psh, 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 psh. And there's the hospital set. So now it's time to do the animation, and this is probably the part I stress over the most, and that's probably because I've spent the last month in pre-production doing the storyboards and all the sets and whatnot, and I've kind of built it all up in my mind of what I've got to do, stressing, figuring out how I'm going to do it. But the way I do it is I start off by doing the easiest stuff first and kind of building my way up to it. And the easiest stuff I thought first was to do all the ships, like do it on motion control sliders or on Lazy Susans and things like that, just doing simple turns and just gradually building myself up to it. I actually had to destroy the ship so that I could have chunks flying out of it when it exploded. Here are the bigatures that I made, propped up on DVDs, of course. Here's the escape pod entrance, which I blasted some expanding foam out of it to kind of show the disease kind of coming out of the ship at the end of the video. Here's the escape pod on the Lazy Susan and all the different fins that I painted up that I attach on frame by frame to look like they pop out and then it blasts off into outer space at the end. So here's the dead astronaut in the cockpit, all covered in all the horrible disease and all lit up properly. And I actually have him on the motion control slider, so it kind of reveals him. And I always like to start off the Psychedelic Porn Crumpets with their name, almost like it's a film essentially, and it's always fun kind of coming up with different versions. And for this one I decided I'm going to have loads of different eyeballs, and one of those eyeballs is going to be the O in the porn. And here we are in the hospital set. As I said, I was really pleased with this set. It was all modular, so I could kind of move it all around, so the actual doors could be at the back and make it look like it was a massive hexagonal room, which is cool because normally I make square rooms, so I thought, let's do something a bit more fun, a bit more creative. So I actually did this shot in reverse, so I actually animated all the tentacles and cut them down and pulled them into the belly and then sealed up the belly, and then when it played in reverse, like the belly in the thing when the mouth opens up with the teeth, and then all the tentacles sprout out of it. And then with this guy I just let gravity do its thing, and I hung him upside down and kind of had him on the lever so I could move him left to right and just kind of had him smacking against the wall back and forth. That was a lot of fun. And here's the first load of carnage within this scene. This is a lot of fun to do. I am not a violent person by any stretch of the imagination, but for some reason I love doing stop motion gore. It's a lot of fun. And here is one of the rifles, and then I have interchangeable muzzle flashes which I blast with a torch for a couple of frames. And now I'm doing like one of the head explosions, and I absolutely love doing this. It's so much fun, like just gradually pulling the head apart and putting all stringy bits of blood and big goopy bits coming out, and pulling the eyes apart and pushing them out with wire to make it look like the eyes are like popping and gouging out. It is a lot of fun. And I know that probably sounds sadistic and weird to say, but I don't know, I just get a kick out of it. It's a lot of fun. It's quite messy though, like flicking all this fake blood. And now here he is, Arachnid himself, and this was probably my favourite shot to animate, just him being pulled up into the air by the tentacles. And if you notice, I actually turned the set upside down and had him hanging upside down, so then when I flipped it up it looked like he was being held up in the air by the tentacles. And I actually wanted this to be a bit more gratuitous, the pulling apart, but it was just quite hard to do, but it looked okay in the end. And here is the final shot of all the characters who've been mutilated by the tentacles. And like I said, this scene was a lot of fun, and I probably put all my effort into this minute-long sequence, and it probably shows. The vent I actually had on screw so I could rotate it back and forth, and just to save wear and tear on the Kaylee model I just made this hand on this rig. And here we are in a new room. This is kind of like a supply loading room kind of place, and as you can see I was actually having problems with this model. It started to crack in various joints. This is kind of like my homage to Alien, you know, that famous shot where the alien mouth comes towards Sigourney Weaver. As I said before, I was so chuffed with this monster, and I didn't think he'd be able to animate that well, but it wasn't too bad. I had to put it on Lazy Susan to make it like it was turning around, and I put some slime in the mouth to kind of drip out frame by frame. And here it is picking up one of the supply boxes, and I held them in place with like little tacks, and I animated Kaylee like rolling away, and I was quite pleased with how that turned out actually. And I think this bit looks pretty cool. It's kind of like Venom or something, but this was my friend Rob's idea, and I think it's kind of taken from The Thing, where someone's head like kind of sprouts out of the monster, and it's almost as if to kind of give Kaylee that second thought, should I kill him or not? Is my husband still in there? But you know, obviously she still blows him up, because if you look at all this carnage now, this is meant to be the monster like sprayed everywhere. And I put slime everywhere so it could all drip down just to kind of add to the carnage. And some of the canisters I have was running out of the expanding foam, but I managed to just spray some, and it kind of created these like blood spatter effects all over Kaylee and the wall behind her. And I think it looked really cool actually, and it stuck really well to the plaster scene, so it kept the continuity going throughout the video. And here I am filming the corridor, which the door opens up to reveal the escape pod. I was really pleased with how the escape pod looked actually. It was pretty cool. I mean, you don't see it much in the video, but oh well. And now here's another form of the monster, even less human-like now. He's just a giant blob with this big eyeball that opens up. And again, more slime dripping out of the mouth, and even bigger tentacles that come out as she crawls backwards and pulls the gun out and shoots. Where Canada gets taken over by Tetsuo, and he has to like blow his way out of it. And I found this great stuff that's called foam clay, and it covered up a whole big area, but it meant that I could kind of dip all my fingers into it frame by frame, and it kind of made it look like it was still alive and it was still moving while still animating Kaylee. By this point, Kaylee was completely fucked and like the plasticine was just all cracking, it was just unusable. But I managed to get this last shot done with her before I had to remake her. And I used all kinds of slime and smart putty on her just to kind of get that gooey effect, and yeah, I think it looked pretty cool. So originally this scene was meant to take place in a locker room, but I just didn't have the time to build another set. So I cobbled together like a little bedroom for her, and I put some ambient lighting in there. I made a photo of the happy couple, and I even made one of the characters from the album Gatefold. There's some little boots there, and I actually glued her feet down so that she wouldn't move around when I was animating her. Now, I spoke of smart putty earlier, and it's a really great asset for animation because it makes animating liquids possible. So you can do splashes and, in this case, tears. So now I'm doing the final sequence for the video, and this is actually the intro of the video. For some reason I did it last, I don't know why. But this is where the Mandy reference comes into play because I really love the lighting of that film and I wanted to emulate it in this scene. And here I am just pouring loads of blood. This blood is just made out of golden syrup and food colouring, and my room smelt like a sweet shop and it was incredibly sticky. Everything I touched just had golden syrup everywhere. And this was our introduction to the three heroes walking onto the infected ship. Originally there was going to be 4 of them, but I think you should work in odd numbers. Odd numbers look better, like so 1, 3s or 5s as opposed to 4s. You can kind of get a better character placement, I think, if you have odd numbers. And again, like I said earlier, I put some lights on the end of their guns just to add to that ambient lighting within the video. And if you look, this set was massive. It's probably one of the biggest sets I've ever done. And you can just see the carnage. It looks disgusting. And yeah, like I said, that golden syrup just got everywhere. So I created a load of fun-looking aliens that have been destroyed by this disease. There's an eyeball-looking alien with loads of brain matter spewing out of his head. And here's a bug guy who's very similar to the bug guy in the Tally-Ho video. Maybe they're related, or you know, they're the same species at least. I love this guy. I was so pleased with the Squish guy, and you hardly see him, and I wish I made him one of the main characters. And here I am animating the very last shot of the video. It was midnight and the video had to be delivered the next day, so I just had to burn the midnight oil and get it done. So with the animation out of the way, it's now time to do all the special effects. Now really I actually did all these at the same time as doing the animation. But this shot, I was genuinely quite pleased how it turned out. There was a few little aspects in the animation I wasn't happy with that I had to fix. I actually forgot to move this left arm for one frame, so I had to kind of create a movement by cutting out one of the arms and kind of moving it around. And then here I wasn't actually happy with the motion of the arm for one frame. It kind of was a bit jittery, so I kind of had to kind of create an arm out of various different frames. And yeah, I'm not really making much sense, but it makes sense in my head and it looked a lot better in the end. And here I am creating the beam of light coming from the torch, and it's just a solid shape that I use mask to create the beam of light, and use feathers and then cut away with other shapes, and then keyframe it by just moving the mask frame by frame along with the claymation footage. And then turn the opacity down. As you can see, when I rock back and forth, you can see the beam of light moving. And then I do the exact same thing to the device in our hand by adding a nice like turquoise green colour onto it, so it's like got a nice glow to it. I wasn't happy with the amount of blood in the shot, so I poured more blood into it. And not only that, I animated one of the corpse's hands like falling into the shot as well, just to kind of give it a little bit more movement and stuff like that. And here I'm just fixing one of the lights, putting a little bit more light, putting some more ambient smoke into it, and then cutting out one of the layers of the foreground and then putting another layer of smoke on top of it just to kind of create even more depth. So then I compile all those elements down into one shot and add a rotation just to kind of add to that kind of off-kilter feeling to it. And then I add some lens flares and a bit of a colour grade, some RGB split and some chromatic aberration just to add to that sci-fi feel to it. And then I add some particles and things like that and some noise, because I don't like my shots to look too perfect. I kind of like that 70s, 80s vibe where it's a little bit noisy and stuff. And yeah, I'm really pleased with the final shot. So this is quite an easy shot. This is just Slughead shooting his gun. But I just wanted to up the intensity of the gunfire, so I added some light effects onto the muzzle flash and a bit of motion blur just to kind of make it feel a bit more impactful. And I have to do that every other frame for every gun blast. And here is a 3D shell element that's from Action Essentials, I believe, and I just place it on the gun and kind of keyframe and animate it kind of coming out of the gun. And I duplicate it several times, but kind of alter the movement a bit so it doesn't look too samey, and then I add motion blur to it to really sell the effect. Then I add some more of that green smoke atmosphere, as if like there's some toxins coming off from the monster. And then I compile the shot down into one and then add some colour grading, some RGB split, the chromatic aberration and some camera movement, and then some noise just again to make it feel a bit 70s and 80s. And then I just feel like even though it's subtle, it just kind of adds to the shot, makes it a little bit more impactful. So I did my best to have as few pure green screen shots as possible, just because it slows everything down. But obviously for the space shots, I kind of have to do that. So I shot one of the spaceships on green screen and then had to mask out the rods that are holding it up and things like that. Put a little bit of a grade onto it and add some boosters onto it. In this shot, you'll see the motion of movement that I put onto the ship. So it kind of like goes forward and comes towards camera and away from camera. I also add loads of space elements, so there's like a plasticine background with plasticine stars, and then I actually get some elements of actual pictures of just space atmosphere. These stop motion planets are actually from the very first Porn Crumpets video I did, Keen for Kick-Ons, and I just cut circles out of them to make them a bit more spherical and add a blur behind them and make an even bigger planet, and again put another blur behind it. And then I blur the whole shot in the background and add some more colour gradients to kind of make it, you know, some nice trippy colours. Add some asteroids, again these are from Keen for Kick-Ons, and I keyframe animate those rotating in the shot, so I can kind of make a lot of the ships weaving in and out of these asteroids. I add some speed lines which I blur and turn the opacity down on, and I layer those in front and behind the ship, and add some more of the colour gradients and some more asteroids which I colour grade and put motion blur on and things like that. Here is the shot all compiled together, and it's looking alright, but it needs a little bit more motion to it, so I add a bit of camera movement to it, and as you can see it's looking a lot better and a lot more interesting, but I still need to add a glow, some RGB separation, the chromatic aberration, and also posterized time, which slows it down to 12 frames a second again, and I think it looks a lot better in my opinion. And here we are, here's the crappy green screen shot compared to the final shot in the video, and I think it looks pretty good at the end of the day. And yeah, I think we're done. Whew. Well, I'm sorry that was pretty long-winded, but as you can see there was quite a lot to cover. I threw everything including the kitchen sink at this video. And as always, I want to thank the band, so Jack, Rish, Chris, Danny and Billy, and of course their manager Murray, for letting me go off my little flights of fancy and making the video that I wanted to make. And so far, it's worked out really well, because the band always seems to enjoy what I make, but not only that, the audience seems to enjoy what I make. And as an artist, you can't ask for anything more than that. Just having that freedom to be creative and having people embrace it. And not only that, they're starting to get invested in this world that we're creating, you know, with the other videos like Mr. Prism, Tally-Ho, Puke Box, Acid Dent, and now Pillhouse. And hopefully it's only going to grow from here and get wilder and crazier and even more fun and intertangled and messy. And I can't wait to see where it goes, because to be honest, I don't even know myself where it's going to go. I've got ideas, but Yeah, it's very exciting. So if you want to check out the music video, there's a link for it in the description below. There's also a playlist including all my other videos for the Psychedelic Porn Crumpets and videos for all the other artists that I work for. If you enjoyed this video, please consider hitting the like button, or if you feel really fancy, you can hit the subscribe button. I'd really appreciate it. If you want to reach out to me on social media, I'm on Instagram and Facebook. And until next time, take care and goodbye.